Hey guys, in today's video, you will learn about the shocking account of Xavier Montgomery, a man who died and was confronted by Jesus with a shocking revelation about Holy Communion. What he discovered on the other side will shake everything. You think about religious rituals. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and comment below which city you are watching. Get ready. This story will move you. I am Xavier Montgomery, and since my early years, the church has been the refuge and stage of my existence. I grew up among hymns and prayers, where each ritual seemed like an echo of tradition, but little understood the real meaning behind them. I remember cold Sunday mornings when, with my eyes still heavy from sleep, I walked towards the imposing church in New Orleans, feeling the weight of a routine that I barely questioned. On the way, the distant sound of a brass band accompanied me while the aroma of incense and candle wax announced the presence of the sacred. Upon entering, you were greeted with warm smiles and hugs that sealed a shared faith. The walls decorated with colorful stained glass windows and the soft lighting of the chandeliers created an environment where reverence mixed with the usual. Despite the apparent fervor, a part of me felt distant, as if I were just fulfilling a formality, an obligation inherited from the past. During the services, while my hands were joined in prayers, my mind wandered through confused thoughts, questioning the essence of those rituals that had been taught to me since childhood. There were times when I found myself thinking, isn't all this just an empty custom, a mere soulless tradition? However, the comfort of routine and the fear of breaking with tradition prevented me from seeking deeper answers. I talked to some of the brothers, but the words were always mild, full of affirmations that to me sounded like repetitions of an old mantra. Even so, within the silence of my being, a restlessness began to grow, a subtle feeling that something essential was being lost among the rehearsed rituals and automatic prayers. Between the murmurs of the faithful and the rhythmic sound of the bells, I kept a secret, the awareness that, although apparent devotion, my faith was a shadow of what it should be. A part of me longed for an experience that would break through that barrier of complacency, an awakening that would reveal the true meaning of the sacred. The pain of losing Celeste invaded my existence with the force of a gale, disrupting every routine I had built over the years. I still vividly remember the afternoon the news arrived. The sun, normally welcoming, seemed to hide behind heavy clouds, as if sensing the approaching morning. We were sitting in the cozy living room of our home in New Orleans, and suddenly, a call interrupted the comfortable silence we shared. The doctor's voice, choked with gravity, brought the devastating news. Celeste had not resisted the illness that had affected her for weeks, a silent battle that she had fought alone. "Xavier, I'm sorry," he murmured, and his words spread across the room like sharp blades, cutting through the hope that I insisted on maintaining. Hearing those words, my mind filled with memories. Celeste's infectious laugh, the soft touch of her hands, the way she turned every moment into something special. I remember trying to hold on to these memories, as if they could somehow stop the inevitable. That day I spent hours at his bedside, holding his hand and whispering promises of eternal love, even though I knew time was running out. "Stay with me, Celeste, please," I begged through tears, while she, with a weak smile, responded with a look that said that, even in the midst of pain, her love for me would transcend death itself. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with an emptiness I had never felt before. The house, which once resounded with the joy of his presence, became a cold and desolate space, where every object seemed to hold the echo of his voice. This loss, so sudden and devastating, marked me deeply, leaving an emotional scar that would never completely heal. That afternoon, marked by silent goodbyes, was the beginning of a spiral of pain and reflection that would shape my entire spiritual path in the following years. As winter began to give way to a milder breeze, I found myself immersed in my concerns when Gideon Carter appeared like a voice of warning. One autumn night, as we walked side by side through the wet streets of New Orleans, the rhythmic sound of our footsteps on the pavement served as a soundtrack to the reflections unfolding in my mind. "Xavier, you're so absorbed in these thoughts," he said, with a tone that mixed concern and skepticism, and his eyes, always attentive, reflected the sincerity that I used to ignore. During the walk, Gideon didn't mince words. "You've always been a man of deep faith, but lately you seem to have lost yourself in the maze of obligations. It's not enough to just fulfill the rituals, you have to live them with an open heart." His words resonated within me, awakening memories of a time when faith pulsed strong, before turning into a mere empty custom. His every word felt like a sharp blade, cutting through the inertia I had built around my spirituality. "Xavian, the emptiness you feel is not just because of the loss of Celeste, but because your faith has turned into something automatic, shadow of what it could be if you truly connected with the divine," he continued as our shadows lengthened under the yellow streetlights. I knew deep down that his criticism was more than just a complaint. They were a call for me to encourage myself to break away from the superficiality of my rituals and rediscover the essence of the sacred. Gideon, with his firm posture and penetrating gaze, challenged me to question every gesture and every prayer I had performed without emotion. "Don't let pain and routine dim the light within you," he stated with a conviction that, for a brief moment, illuminated the labyrinth of my soul. In that sincere conversation, I realized that his warning was an invitation to introspection, a call for me to set aside conventions and seek true transformation. During a solitary dinner in a modest New Orleans restaurant, I felt the first blow of an unforgiving fate. I was absorbed in my thoughts when suddenly, a sharp and uncontrollable pain lodged itself in the center of my chest. The environment around me seemed to fade into a confusing haze, and the clinking of cutlery and the voices of other customers became distant echoes. I tried to articulate a cry for help, but the pain, fierce and relentless, robbed me of even the ability to speak. As I struggled to brace myself against the table, words began to escape me, and in the blink of an eye, my vision blurred. I felt like my body was breaking away, floating away from the world I knew. Why now?" I murmured in a hoarse, barely perceptible voice, as the surroundings became a blur of distorted colors and sounds. At that moment, time seemed to have stopped, and I found myself suspended on a threshold between life and death, where each heartbeat echoed like the sound of a bell announcing the imminent end. The internal chaos intensified as consciousness diluted, and the feeling of lightness enveloped me in an almost supernatural way. In the midst of this state of transition, I realized that something extraordinary was about to occur. The anguish that consumed me slowly gave way to a strange calm, as if, in that brief moment, the universe was about to reveal a hidden secret. My body, unable to retain life, seemed to free itself from its earthly bonds, and the boundary between the physical and the spiritual dissolved before my eyes. I was on the edge of an abyss where existence and the unknown met. Someone help me, I thought, even when the very idea of help seemed distant, and just when everything seemed to be lost, I felt an invisible force push me to a new level, where the pain turned into a revelation. This moment of near death, full of uncertainty and anguish, would be the prelude to a transformation that would change my life forever. As I floated in this space between being and nothingness, I felt a strange freedom that, at the same time, terrified me. The physical world, with all its colors and textures, seemed to recede, leaving me suspended in a silent vastness where time and space lost their meaning. Amid this state of detachment, images and sounds began to intertwine in a surreal way. Memories of my life flashed before my eyes with an intensity I had never experienced, as if I could relive each moment with details that had previously escaped my notice. I heard voices, first faint, then clearer and more insistent, that seemed to come from everywhere. "Xavian," they whispered in unison, each one filled with a mixture of disapproval and compassion. For an instant, Darian Wolf's voice stood out, calm and enigmatic, saying, "You have ignored the call of your heart. It is time to awaken to the truth." I felt a chill run down my spine as the voices alternated, each one revealing forgotten and painful parts of my existence. Some recalled moments of joy, while others exposed the mistakes made, the superficiality of the rituals that I so often practiced without reflection. In the midst of this whirlwind, the feeling of being completely disembodied was accompanied by a disturbing clarity, I could see not just my own steps, but the paths of my entire life, as if the universe was unfolding my destiny before me. With each new image, a feeling of regret arose, intensified by the voices that charged me for each slip and each failure. "It's not too late, Xavier," echoed one of the voices, mixing warning and hope. The experience, so intense and multifaceted, was a direct confrontation with my own essence, forcing me to face head-on the shadows that until then I had ignored. In that moment of revelation, as the images alternated and the voices continued to dictate truths that had long been repressed, I felt a deep sadness mixed with the impulse for change. I was facing a spiritual crossroads, where each vision was an invitation to transform the emptiness of my faith into something real and pulsating. The light that flooded the room intensified in an almost scorching way, and as I floated on that threshold, a majestic and imposing presence made itself felt. From the midst of that light, the figure of Jesus emerged, whose expression was at the same time serene and penetrating, as if each look of his exposed the most intimate corners of my soul. The silence that fell over me was broken by a voice that, despite being calm, reverberated with authority. "Xavier, why do you treat the sacred with such indifference?" The tone was both rebuke and compassion, and each word seemed to echo like soft thunder through my being. I felt a cold that was not of this world run down my spine, and for a brief moment my words were lost in the vastness of that encounter. I didn't understand the depth of what it was supposed to be, I stammered, not finding the strength to justify the years of empty rituals and the apathy that accompanied them. Jesus remained silent for a moment, as if measuring the weight of my repentance. Then, with a gesture that seemed to embrace my weakness, he continued, "Every action you performed without your heart accumulates like shadows that obscure the truth of faith. But today, you have the opportunity to rewrite that story." His words penetrated me with the force of a revelation. His voice, which before sounded distant and ritualistic, was now a direct call to my inner self, urging me to confront my mistakes and seek genuine repentance. "Do not deceive yourself, Xavier. The sacred demands more than automatic gestures. It demands the renewal of every fiber of your being. Look at yourself and recognize the truth," he said, with a conviction that made every cell of my being vibrate. In this confrontation, the pain of my sins was brought to the surface, but simultaneously, a faint hope began to blossom, like the first light of a dawn after an endless night. I realized at that moment that this was not just a trial, but an opportunity for redemption. Every word, every look, cried out for a transformation that could only come through the sincere recognition of my mistakes. The intensity of that divine encounter seemed to tear me away from the shackles of superficiality and launch me towards a new journey of faith and truth. The light of redemption brought me a new purpose that, almost unexpectedly, transformed every trace of anguish into determination. Upon returning from the transcendent experience, I realized that I could no longer live trapped in the silence of my own pain and regret. A mission sprouted in my heart, a vocation that would transcend the simple act of surviving. It was the call to share my testimony and alert those who, like me, lived prisoners of a faith without depth. Each day that followed became an opportunity to rebuild not only my spirituality, but also that of those who crossed my path. I walked the streets of New Orleans with different eyes, seeing in each face a story, an internal struggle similar to mine. In every conversation, in every lost look, I saw reflections of my own anguish, and this drove me to talk about the transformation I experienced. "We cannot treat the sacred as a mere ritual," I repeated to myself and to those who listened to me, in a firm voice, but full of emotion. I felt that the simple act of reporting my mistakes and successes could be the spark that would light the flame of true faith in someone's heart. The memories of moments when my faith turned into a mere convention now became teachings for the future. In meetings with friends, family, and even strangers, I shared the visions and rebuke I experienced, emphasizing that transformation does not come from automatic gestures but from a deep inner awakening. Each story told, each tear shared seemed to cement my new mission, And with each story, the emptiness that previously consumed me was filled with the certainty that there was a reason for my survival. I saw myself not just as a survivor of a near-death, but as a messenger of a possible new beginning, a beacon for those who, stuck in their routines, have not yet discovered the true essence of faith. That night, after all the transformation, I realized that the rebirth I experienced was just the beginning of a new era in my existence. Back in the world of the living, I walked the streets of New Orleans with a renewed look, as if each step carried the weight and lightness of a rewritten destiny. The memories of that divine encounter, Jesus' simultaneous rebuke and welcome, still resonated in my being, pushing me to embrace an authentic and transformative faith. Every dawn, as the city awakened with its sounds and colors, I remembered that I was no longer the man who took refuge in empty rituals. I was a messenger of hope and renewal. In meetings with friends, family, and even strangers, I shared my testimony with a sincerity I had never known before. The words flowed from me like a river, carrying with them not only the sadness of a past marked by superficiality, but also the strength of a present that pulsed with the promise of a future full of meaning. I encouraged them to look within, to question the habits that kept them tied to conventions, and to seek, with all intensity, that vital connection with the divine that transcends any mechanical ritual. During long walks along the banks of the Mississippi River, under the blanket of a starry sky, I found moments of introspection where I allowed myself to feel each beat of my heart as a reminder of my mission. Life, with its nuances of pain and beauty, became a constant invitation for renewal. In every look and every simple gesture, I saw the possibility of a new beginning. Aware of human fragility and the depth of the sacred, I learned that true rebirth happens when we dare to abandon what keeps us chained to the past and embrace the chance to be transformed. During the whirlwind of images and voices that surrounded me on that threshold between the real and the supernatural, two presences emerged with strength and singularity, challenging what I believed I knew about the divine. The first of these was Darian Wolf, whose aura of wisdom and mystery contrasted with the chaotic intensity of the moment. He appeared like a serene beacon, with a calm countenance and a voice that, even in the midst of the hustle and bustle, conveyed a comforting clarity. "Xavian, do not fear this abyss. It is only the portal to the awakening you so desperately need," said Darian, as his presence seemed to dispel some of the shadows that surrounded me. His words, soft and imposing, invaded my mind, bringing back memories of a time when faith pulsed with truth and was not limited to empty rituals. Shortly afterwards, the atmosphere transformed again with the arrival of Veronica Ashcroft. His presence was like a breath of life, mixing the tangible with the intangible, and his eyes, deep and enigmatic, seemed to carry secrets from worlds I had never imagined. "Xavian, your journey is not just one of repentance, but of reconstruction," she stated with a tone that mixed tenderness and firmness, as if she knew the most hidden corners of my soul. While Darian guided me with words of comfort, Veronica approached with the transformative energy of someone who carries the essence of renewal. Together they formed an unusual duo, a serene mentor and a messenger of transformation, who, in unison, revealed the truth that the mistakes of the past could be redeemed by true spiritual awakening. Between the murmurs of the universe and the gentle lull of voices that seemed to come from another dimension, I heard their advice as if they were whispers of destiny. "Let repentance become the seed of new life, Xavian. True faith requires not only the recognition of mistakes, but the courage to change," they repeated in unison, making the emptiness that consumed me fill with hope and purpose. At that moment, I realized that encounter, so unexpected and full of meaning, would be the catalyst for an irreversible internal transformation, paving the way for a rebirth that transcended mere survival. Back in the world of the living, I felt rebirth pulsing in every fiber of my being. He walked through the streets of New Orleans as if he were seeing the city for the first time, with eyes that were no longer hidden behind shadows of fear and regret. Around every corner, life revealed itself with an intensity that was previously strange to me. One Sunday morning, as the sun broke through the clouds, I met an old friend, Thomas, whose familiar presence rekindled the flame of a long-dormant hope. "Xavian, you look different," he said with a smile of slight surprise, as if you freed yourself from an invisible weight. His words, simple and sincere, filled my heart with new conviction. At each meeting, at each conversation, I found myself invited to share the story of my transformation. I would sit with people from all corners, on a park bench, in cozy cafes, or even in casual conversations on busy streets. And in a shaky but determined voice, I would narrate the journey that brought me out of the abyss and into the light of a spiritual rebirth. "Do not live trapped in empty rituals," I exhorted, with the memory of Jesus' words echoing in my mind. "Seek in the silence of the heart the true connection with the divine." These words, spoken with the honesty of a man who faced darkness, awakened in his listeners deep reflection and at times silent tears. In meetings with study groups and church meetings, I began to notice a change not only in myself, but also in those who allowed themselves to hear my testimony. The conversation flowed naturally, where old habits were challenged and new perspectives gained space. One afternoon, during a meeting in a sanctuary lit by the soft light of stained glass windows, a teary-eyed woman confessed, "I never thought anyone could find so much peace after so much suffering." And at that moment, I realized that my story became more than just a personal narrative. It was an invitation to transformation. As the city moved along its pace, I felt part of a silent movement, where each story shared helped build a community of awakened souls. The pain of the past, transformed into teaching, now served as a beacon for those who sought the true essence of faith. Little by little, the veil of my old existence fell apart, revealing a rebirth that illuminated every moment of my new life. Walking through the streets of New Orleans, I felt the weight of a transformation that was not limited to the body, but that resonated deeply in the soul. One serene morning, as the sun rose shyly over the ancient rooftops, I found myself surrounded by faces that in some way reflected the hope I now carried. As I approached a small cafe, I came across a lady who, upon recognizing me, said with a soft smile, "Xavian, you have something different in your eyes today, as if light had invaded your heart." His words touched me, and at that moment, I understood that my experience, although painful and intense, had become a beacon for those seeking a path of truth. At every step, the city reminded me that life is a constant invitation to renewal. I met with friends and strangers, sharing my story without reservation, as if with each word spoken I was weaving a new story of faith and courage. "Let us not live trapped in empty rituals," I declared during a conversation in a park, "because the divine reveals itself to those who dare to transform pain into learning and repentance into a new beginning." Each sentence he uttered was accompanied by looks of understanding and, at times, tears of emotion, while listeners realized that, even in the shadows of loss and fear, there was a flame of hope that would never be extinguished. On that journey, I learned that true rebirth happens when we make space for change, when we leave behind the ghosts of the past and accept the invitation of a new dawn. With each meeting, with each gesture of affection, I reaffirmed myself as a messenger of transformation, inviting everyone to seek genuine faith, lived with intensity and truth. The city, with its melancholic and vibrant beauty, witnessed the metamorphosis of a man who refused to surrender to superficiality, embracing instead the healing power of sincere repentance and renewed hope. The final light of my transformation radiated like a beacon, guiding me to a new level of existence. At that moment, as the gloom of the past dissipated, I realized that I had achieved an inner rebirth that was reflected in every gesture, in every word spoken, and in every look I exchanged with those who sought the truth. Walking again through the historic streets of New Orleans, I felt that the essence of my new faith was consolidated with each dawn, as if the universe itself was conspiring to renew hope in hearts thirsty for change. I sat in a serene park and let the echoes of my journey merge with the gentle whisper of the wind. I remembered moments of pain, revelation, and above all, awakening to a life full of purpose. As I revisited each chapter of my existence, I understood that the true invitation was to transform regret into learning, to use the scars of the past as reminders of the strength that resides in vulnerability and the courage to change. It's not about erasing mistakes, I thought, but about honoring them as part of the process that leads to true redemption. My mission, which once seemed like an unbearable burden, turned into a blessing shared with each person who crossed my path. In each encounter, whether in a brief conversation or in a deep encounter with friends and strangers, I conveyed the certainty that spiritual renewal was a constant journey, where faith was shown not in empty rituals but in the ability to feel, reflect, and transform one's life. Every story, every word spoken was an invitation for others to also dare to break with convention and embrace an existence lived with sincerity and love. When I finished narrating my journey, I found myself facing a new horizon, where the sacred was not just a ceremony, but a living and pulsating experience. My final invitation was for everyone to allow themselves to be transformed, so that, like me, they would find within their souls the necessary strength to start over, always with the conviction that each day was a new opportunity to be reborn. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.